Welcome to another video wherein I'm going to be explaining the property buying process or the property purchase process for real estate in Dubai. Now, coming to this board, we have two markets, the primary market and the secondary or the resale market. The primary market is when you purchase a property directly from a developer, and the secondary market is when you purchase it from an owner or a landlord. Starting off with the primary market, more particularly for an off-plan property with a payment plan, because that's usually how properties are bought here in Dubai, especially for investment purposes or even home ownership for that matter. The first step would be, of course, making a reservation deposit, which is a part of the down payment if you don't usually make the down payment on the spot. Now, when you make that payment, you will be signing a booking form, which will have the details of your personal particulars if you're the owner, or if you want to opt for joint ownership between you and your wife. Both your personal particulars have to be filled out on that booking form. And after the booking form, you're expected to pay the remaining down payment, which is usually, let's say, 10% in this case. And you have to make the remaining payment within a stipulated period of time, which is usually up to a week. Step 2 involves a contract or an agreement called the Sales Purchase Agreement, or SPA. Now, the developer will be drafting a thick booklet called the SPA, which is the contract between you as the buyer and the developer as the seller, and all the legal obligations, etc., that bind the two of you. The SPA is a document that is usually couriered to you first, because if you're not physically present here, if you're in your home country overseas, you will have to sign it physically for the most part. Once you sign it, you have to courier it back or send it back to the developer, wherein they will sign it. And once they sign it, they will register it with the Dubai Land Department so that they register the property under your name. And this is usually done, like I said, physically via courier for the SPA, but sometimes you can provide an electronic signature via email regarding the same. Now, after the SPA, once the developer signs it and registers it with the Dubai Land Department, you will get a document known as the Oqood, Oqood, which is also your pre-title deed. Now, you usually get the Oqood within 1 to 3 months from the time of purchasing your property and signing the booking form. But this document will establish you as the legal owner of the property under the eyes of law. And Oqood in Arabic means contract. Now, you will be using the Oqood as your legal ownership document while your property is under construction. Once it is finished and ready to be handed over, and once you take handover, you will be receiving your title deed for the property. And that's basically all the steps in a nutshell. Of course, if the property is already completed, you will not get the Oqood, you will get your title deed instead. But nonetheless, the steps for the primary market are usually as such. These are the steps that you would go through for when you purchase a property from the developer. And of course, you can always reach out to your agent of choice. There is 0 commission for when you purchase a property directly from the developer, and that agent can give you multiple options and guide you throughout the entire process. Now, moving on to the secondary or the resale market, this comes in handy for when you want to perhaps resell your property, or if you want to purchase a property that is already owned by an individual because it is completed, and you probably do not want to wait for your property to be completed while it is under construction. Now, the steps are a little more complicated, but I'm just going to give you a gist of the entire thing. The first step would be something called as Form A, which is the contract between the seller of the property and the agent who is selling it. It allows the agent to act as an intermediary to sell that seller's property. The second document involved would be a Form B, which is essentially the contract between the agent and the buyer of that property, which allows the buyer to purchase the property through the agent as the intermediary. Now, the third form in place is the most important, I would say, because it is going to serve as the MOU, or the Memorandum of Understanding, which is called Form F. Now, Form F is the contract between the seller and the buyer with the agent or the agents representing either party as the intermediaries. Form F basically locks in a seller and a buyer who are contractually obligated to exchange ownership at the time of the transfer. Now, Form F is usually valid for a period of between 30 to 45 days and can be extended up to 60 days, depending on the circumstances. Within the validity of Form F, the transfer has to take place, wherein the seller sells his or her property to the buyer, and the ownership gets transferred from the seller to the buyer. Now, why would you need between 30 to 45 days? Well, for example, if it is a cash buyer, he or she may need some time to organize for the relevant funds in order for the transfer to take place. And if it is a mortgage buyer, of course, there are a little more steps when it comes to that. Firstly, if you're a mortgage buyer, you will have the property valuated by the bank. Thereafter, you will get something known as the final offer letter from the bank, depending on your pre-approval and relationship with the bank. Now, once the final offer letter is issued by the bank, the seller will apply for a no objection certificate and pay the relevant fees in order to obtain that certificate from the developer of his or her property. And once we have the no objection certificate or the NOC in place, it is usually valid for a period of 30 days from the time of issuance. So within that period of 30 days, the transfer will have to take place, all within the time frame of the validity of Form F. And of course, after the NOC is issued, then it is used by the buyer's bank to prepare the manager's checks in order for them to have the transfer at a trustee office that is affiliated with the DLD, or the Dubai Land Department. Now, at the time of the transfer, both the buyer and the seller have to be physically present. If the buyer cannot be present, then he has to organize for a power of attorney, or a POA. And within a period of, let's say, an hour to an hour and a half max, the exchange of ownership will take place, all electronic. The manager's checks will be presented to the buyer from the seller in the presence of a trustee official or trustee officer. And once everything is satisfied and agreed upon, the trustee officer gets to go ahead once the relevant fees are paid by the buyer, such as the DLD fee, the trustee fee, and some other fees that I don't want to talk about now because that's probably for another video. The new buyer becomes the owner of the property and gets a new Oqood, or a title deed, depending on whether the property is under construction or it is already completed. That basically summarizes your property purchase process for both the primary market and the secondary market. This is important for when you want to purchase a property from the developer, and this is important if you'd like to resell the property, eventually maximizing your return on equity when you're reselling for a premium, or if you're planning to just exit in general. If you'd like some more guidance on this particular process, I've left my details in the description below. Feel free to reach out to me.